The F-16S flanked her small Cessna, weapons systems locked and ready. Major Heinrich Brenner gave the final command. Engage in 5 seconds. Lieutenant Elise DuPont had her finger over the trigger when the radar operator froze. A call sign appeared that no one had seen in 15 years. Abort mission. Immediately came the override from above. That is Red Falcon. The cockpit fell silent as the fighter pilots recognized a legend they thought was gone forever. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? Let us know in the comments below and subscribe if you enjoy stories of unsung heroes whose impact echoes long after they disappear. The Bavarian Alps stretch beneath the cloudless autumn sky, silent and majestic. Sunlight glinted off snow-capped peaks, painting the landscape in gold. It was the kind of day pilots lived for. Perfect visibility, minimal turbulence, the world spread out like a canvas below. A small Cessna 172 cut through this serenity, its white fuselage barely visible against scattered clouds. Inside the cockpit, Sophia Crane adjusted her heading with practiced precision. She wore civilian clothing, simple black slacks, and a gray button-down. Her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that revealed sharp cheekbones and eyes that had seen too much. Her expression remained neutral as she consulted her instruments, betraying nothing of her purpose. 200 m away, the comm of Eisenstadt Air Base shattered as alert sirens wailed across the compound. Inside the command center, radar operators tracked the unauthorized aircraft with growing concern. Civilian aircraft has entered restricted airspace bearing 270 at Echo 7, announced the radar technician, voice clipped and professional. No flight plan filed, no response to initial radio contact. Major Brenner strode across the command center, his posture rigid with irritation. At 38, Brenner had built his career on protocol and procedure. His close-cropped dark hair and immaculate uniform projected the image of a man who tolerated no deviations from established rules. Another tourist who can't read a map, he muttered, leaning over the radar screen. How far into the restricted zone? 8 miles and continuing, sir. Speed 120 knots. Heading directly toward the western approach corridor. Brenner's jaw tightened. Unacceptable. Scramble interceptors immediately. This is not a day for sightseers to test our patience. The order rippled through the chain of command. Within minutes, 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons roared down the runway, afterburners glowing against the tarmac. Lieutenant Elise DuPont felt the familiar surge of acceleration press her into her seat as her aircraft lifted into the clear blue sky. At 29, Elise was one of the youngest F-16 pilots at Eisenstadt, but her skill in the cockpit had earned her the respect of the squadron. She had joined the Air Force with dreams of following in the footsteps of the legendary pilots whose classified missions filled the whispered conversations of cadets. Pilots like the ones in the black operations files she wasn't supposed to have glimpsed during her advanced training. Viper 1, this is Control, came Brenner's voice through her headset. Intercept and identify civilian aircraft. Standard protocol, force compliance if necessary. Copy that, Control, Elise responded, adjusting her course. ETA 3 minutes to intercept. Viper 2, take wide approach pattern. Her wingman acknowledged, banking slightly to establish the textbook intercept formation. Elise kept her eyes on the horizon, scanning for visual contact with their target. Back in the command center, Major Brenner paced behind the radar operators, checking his watch repeatedly. Have we identified the aircraft yet? Cessna 172 tail number shows registered to a shell corporation out of Luxembourg. No flight plan filed anywhere in the system. Brenner frowned. Corporate espionage perhaps, or just incompetence. Aircraft is maintaining straight course, sir. No evasive maneuvers. Almost like the radar operator hesitated. Like they want to be intercepted, sir? In the Cessna's cockpit, Sophia noticed the blips on her radar screen indicating approaching military aircraft. She checked her watch right on schedule. Her expression never changed as she maintained her course, adjusting only for minor wind variations. She had flown through far worse than a simple intercept. Elise spotted the Cessna first. Visual contact established. Civilian aircraft at 2 o'clock, proceeding at constant speed and altitude. Initiate contact protocols, ordered Brenner through the radio. Inform them they have entered restricted airspace and must follow your lead immediately. Elise guided her F-16 alongside the smaller aircraft, close enough to make visual contact with the pilot. She was surprised to see a woman at the controls, middle-aged and remarkably calm given the circumstances. Civilian aircraft, this is Luftwaffe Interceptor. You have entered a no-fly zone. Acknowledge immediately and follow my lead to approved airspace. Sophia made eye contact with the F-16 pilot and nodded once, acknowledging the message, yet instead of banking to follow, she maintained her original heading, checking her instruments with methodical calm. Civilian pilot has acknowledged visual contact but is not complying with directional instructions, Elise reported, feeling the first stirrings of concern. This was not the typical response. Repeat warnings and indicate consequences of non-compliance, Brenner ordered, his voice hardening. Display weapon status if necessary. Elise maneuvered her F-16 into a more aggressive posture, ensuring the Cessna's pilot could see that interception was not optional. She repeated the warning, adding, failure to comply will result in forced escort. This is your final warning. Again, Sophia nodded but did not alter course. Control, civilian aircraft still non-responsive to directional commands. Major Brenner's patience had reached its limit. Lieutenant, you are authorized to execute Procedure Charlie, force compliance through simulated attack positioning. Elise had trained for this but never implemented it on an actual intercept. She signaled her wingmen and both F-16s moved into flanking positions to force landing if necessary. Captain Lucien Harcourt had been monitoring the radar since the alert began. Unlike the other operators, Harcourt had specialized training in signal analysis and had served briefly with intelligence before transferring to Eisenstadt. Sir, he called to Major Brenner, I'm picking up an unusual pattern in the transponder data. Brenner barely glanced at Harcourt's station. Irrelevant. Focus on the intercept. But sir, it's cycling through frequencies in a non-standard pattern. Almost like what, Captain? Brenner snapped. Like an old military identification system, sir, pre-digital encryption. For the first time, Brenner paused, looking closer at Harcourt's screen. That's impossible. Those systems were decommissioned years ago. Yes, sir. But I'm running it through recognition database now. Brenner dismissed him with a wave. Probably interference. Lieutenant DuPont, status? Elise had positioned her F-16 directly in the Cessna's flight path, a clear signal that proceeding further would be impossible. To her surprise, the civilian aircraft finally began to bank. Not away from the restricted zone, but in a precise pattern that seemed oddly familiar. Control, civilian aircraft is executing some kind of recognition pattern, not complying with escort but demonstrating unusual flight skills. As Elise watched, the Cessna performed a series of maneuvers no casual pilot should be capable of, minor adjustments in pitch, yaw and roll that formed a distinct sequence. In the command center, Harcourt's computer suddenly pinged. Recognition software had found a match. Sir, I've got an identification from the pattern analysis. Harcourt's voice was tight with surprise. It's coming up as a classified designation, Red Falcon. The command center fell silent. Major Brenner stared at the screen in disbelief. That's impossible. Run it again. System confirmed, sir. Designation, Red Falcon, authentication protocols matching. Before Brenner could respond, the door swung open. Colonel Dominic Voss entered, moving with surprising agility for a man of 67. Though officially retired, Voss served as a consultant at Eisenstadt, his decades in special operations making him invaluable. What did you just say? Voss demanded, his weathered face suddenly alert. Harcourt swallowed. Sir, the system identified the aircraft's transponder pattern as Red Falcon. All color drained from Voss's face. Where did you get that designation? That call sign's been inactive for 15 years. Brenner intervened curtly, Colonel, with all due respect, we have an intercept in progress. This civilian aircraft has violated restricted airspace and refused orders. The transponder signal? Voss insisted. Where's it coming from? The Cessna, sir, Harcourt replied. It's broadcasting on frequencies in use since then. Voss pushed past Brenner to the comm station. Patch me through to the intercept team now. Brenner stepped forward. Colonel, this is my operation. Unauthorized aircraft in restricted airspace, you don't understand what you're dealing with, Major, Voss interrupted, voice low and urgent. If that truly is Red Falcon, stand down immediately. Stand down? That's absurd. Lieutenant DuPont, proceed with Procedure Charlie, you are authorized to force landing. Voss grabbed the mic. Lieutenant, this is Colonel Voss. Verify identification protocol Sierra Echo 7. Elise, confused by conflicting orders, acknowledged. Copy that, Colonel. Implementing Sierra Echo 7 verification. In response, Sophia executed a precise series of maneuvers, complex, impossible for most pilots, and especially in a civilian aircraft. Elise's breath caught. Sir, the civilian aircraft is performing the Alpine weave. I've only seen that in classified training footage. The Alpine Weave, a flight pattern developed for special operations in mountainous terrain, never taught outside elite circles. In the command center, Brenner watched the radar frustrated. This changes nothing. The aircraft still violates restricted airspace. Lieutenant, proceed with escort. Delay that order. Voss shouted, reaching for the emergency phone. His fingers punched a code bypassing normal protocols. This is Voss. Authorization November Bravo 724. Priority Omega, a Red Falcon is in the air. Brenner tried to assert control. Lieutenant DuPont, follow my orders. Prepare to engage in 5-4. Suddenly, all screens flickered. Emergency override activated as a new video feed appeared. General Rosalind Harlow, Joint Chiefs Representative, her stern face signaling this wasn't routine. Colonel Voss, identification confirmed, she demanded. Positive, General, it's her signature pattern. Harlow's gaze shifted to Brenner. Major Brenner, you will stand down immediately. This operation is now classified Priority Omega. Brenner protested, this is a clear security breach, protocol is suspended. Harlow interrupted sharply. We act on direct orders from the Chancellor. Stand down. General, broadcast on all channels, abort mission. Escort Red Falcon to secure landing area via VIP Protocol Omega. The command center erupted. Younger personnel were confused, senior officers exchanged recognition and concern. In her cockpit, Elise heard the new orders, escort Red Falcon in VIP Protocol Omega. She looked across at the Cessna pilot, studying her with new respect. The blonde woman met Elise's gaze steadily, revealing nothing. Yet Elise felt she was in the presence of something extraordinary. That's Red Falcon, she whispered, a chill running down her spine. At Eisenstadt Air Base, orderly military precision gave way to controlled chaos. Officers rushed between stations, communications struggled to establish secure lines. At the center of the storm, Colonel Voss stood rigid, his face grave as he watched the radar show the small Cessna flanked by two F-16s. I need every non-essential person out, Harlow ordered on screen. Clearance level Indigo or higher only. Junior officers and staff evacuated, leaving senior personnel and those in the intercept. Major Brenner remained, face flushed in confusion and indignation. General, I demand an explanation, Brenner pressed. This civilian aircraft has deliberately violated restricted airspace, protocol dictates, Harlow cut him off sharply. Protocol is suspended. You're still here because you're base security commander, but this operation now falls under Joint Special Operations Command Authority. Colonel Voss moved to comms. Lieutenant DuPont, confirm escort formation. Guide Cessna to landing pad Echo 7, full security protocol. No ground personnel except authorized list. In the sky above Eisenstadt, Elise adjusted her F-16's position, processing the dramatic shift. The civilian aircraft held VIP status, now escorted instead of intercepted. Through her canopy, Elise saw the blonde woman flying the Cessna with extraordinary precision, holding perfect formation. Roger that, Colonel. Escort formation established. ETA to Echo 7, 7 minutes. In the command center, doors opened as intelligence officer Valentine Weiss entered with a sealed briefcase. At 52, Weiss moved with the precise care of someone handling highly classified material. Voss nodded. You got here quickly. Already on base when alerts triggered. The system notifies me when certain designations appear. He raised an eyebrow. Is it confirmed? It's her, Voss said. She's performing maneuvers only she could execute in a civilian aircraft. Brenner looked between them, frustration mounting. Please explain who is in that Cessna. Harlow's voice cut through. Major Brenner, what I'm about to tell you is classified above top secret. 15 years ago, the Air Force had a special operations pilot with skills unmatched, call sign Red Falcon. I've never heard of her, Brenner said. You wouldn't have, Weiss replied, placing the briefcase on the table. The program was fully compartmentalized, only those with direct operational need to know. Harlow continued, Red Falcon disappeared 15 years ago after a mission went catastrophically wrong, at least officially. Her status has been classified ever since. Captain Knox, still at radar, looked up. Sir, the Cessna is executing another pattern impossible for this aircraft. On screen, they watched the small plane perform maneuvers defying the physical limitations of civilian flight. That's her confirmation signature, Voss whispered. Only she could fly like that. Weiss placed his palm on a scanner built into the briefcase. It unlocked with a soft click, revealing a digital tablet and metallic key. Permission requested to access Red Falcon files, Weiss said. Granted, override Alpha 9 or Tango, Harlow responded. Weiss inserted the key and entered complex commands. The main screen switched to a classified file interface titled Operation Shadowhawk, Red Falcon primary asset. A photograph appeared, a younger Sophia Crane in Luftwaffe dress uniform receiving a medal from a blurred-faced general. Her personnel file listed decorations and test scores that seemed superhuman. Impossible, Brenner muttered. No pilot can achieve these metrics. She did, Voss said solemnly. I commanded her for 3 years before she was pulled into specialized ops. Footage played, a combat extraction and unmarked aircraft performing impossible maneuvers through AAA fire, landing briefly in narrow terrain, then exiting at high speed despite heavy load. Operation Shadowhawk, Weiss narrated. 15 years ago, 200 hostages were held at a remote mountain compound. Conventional rescue had a 97% casualty estimate. Red Falcon volunteered solo. Solo? With 200 hostages? Brenner asked, incredulous. She made 7 trips under continuous fire, Voss replied, pride mixed with grief. Others said it was suicide. Mission was officially disavowed, Harlow added. But she got everyone out alive. Elise's voice came through comms. Command, we're on final approach to Echo 7. Cessna maintaining tight formation. Request ground security confirmation. Security teams in position, Voss replied. Proceed with landing protocol. As the aircraft descended, Weiss continued Sophia's history. She discovered inconsistencies in mission intel, pushed for investigations into Shadowhawk. She believed it was compromised from within. Then she disappeared. Official records say she died in training accident, Harlow added, but no body was recovered. Not killed, erased, Voss corrected softly. Someone with top clearance removed all trace. Brenner went white. You're telling me a presumed dead Black Ops pilot just flew into our most restricted airspace? Why not contact us through channels? Because she needed to see who would shoot first and who would recognize the pattern, said a new voice. Secretary of Defense Gustav Koenig entered, flanked by security. Tall, steely, in his mid-60s. Mr. Secretary, Harlow acknowledged. I wasn't aware you were incoming. I wasn't until 30 minutes ago, Koenig replied. When Red Falcon's signature appeared, silent alert. Only 3 government officials notified. If she's surfaced now, something catastrophic is imminent. On main screen, radar showed the F-16 escorting the Cessna touching down at Echo 7. Security teams formed a perimeter. Koenig spoke into a mic, patch me through to landing pad. A new video feed showed the Cessna taxiing, flanked by F-16. A small honor guard formed spontaneously. The Cessna's door opened. Sophia Crane emerged carrying a weathered leather briefcase. She paused atop the steps, surveying personnel with a measured gaze. Though in civilian clothes, her bearing was unmistakably military. Elise climbed down from her F-16, saluted. Other pilots followed suit. Sophia nodded subtly. She walked straight to the camera transmitting live. Falcon secure, she said simply, voice rasping from disuse. Koenig leaned to Mike, confirm secure Falcon. Stand by for escort to briefing room Alpha. He turned to the command staff. His face solemn. 15 years ago I was the intel director who received Sophia's concerns about Shadowhawk. I didn't act fast enough. By the time I realized she was right, she had gone underground. What was she right about? Brenner asked. A network of operatives within our intelligence apparatus working against national interests, Koenig answered. She discovered evidence during Shadowhawk that hostage situations were staged to force military responses and shape geopolitics. And now she's back, Voss said. Which means it's happening again. The feed showed Sophia escorted into a secure vehicle. Elise watched from a distance, awed and confused. Bring Lieutenant DuPont to the briefing as well, Koenig instructed. If Sophia chose her as escort, there's a reason. 20 minutes later, in briefing room Alpha, Sophia sat at the table with her leather briefcase before her, calm after 15 years in the shadows. Koenig entered last, closing the door. He hugged her briefly. You were right, he said softly. I should have listened years ago. Her face softened briefly. No time for regrets, Orion. It's happening again. She opened the briefcase, removed a small data drive, and inserted it into the secure system. Screens lit with complex data, communications, intercepts, financial records, personnel movement. Sophia spoke, voice steady and clinical. 3 days ago, a specific pattern of security breaches began across agencies. It's the same signature I identified before Shadowhawk. The same people resurfacing under new aliases. How could you know this from outside the system? Brenner asked. Because I never left it, she replied. I merely shifted into its shadows. For 15 years, I've monitored from the outside, tracking patterns no one inside could see. She highlighted connections across disparate events. They've been plotting for over a decade. The goal is the same: engineered crisis points to force military responses. What's the target? Koenig asked. Sophia brought up a map of power distribution networks. Critical infrastructure. They've positioned assets to trigger simultaneous cascading failures across 3 power grids. Once they collapse, emergency protocols will deploy military escort for repair teams. That's when infiltrators will insert hardware enabling permanent backdoor access. The room fell silent at the stakes. How long do we have? Harlow asked from the video feed. Sophia checked her watch. 36 hours until the first grid collapse. Koenig turned to Major Brenner. I believe you owe Lieutenant Crane an apology. Brenner stood straighter. Ms. Crane, I apologize for nearly engaging you. If I'd known you were doing your job, she interrupted. I was doing mine. The intercept was a necessary test. A test? Elise asked. I needed to know who would recognize the patterns, Sophia explained, glancing at the young lieutenant. Your recognition of the Alpine weave was impressive. Few current pilots would see it. I studied classified flight footage during training, Elise admitted. Your techniques were revolutionary. A ghost of a smile crossed Sophia's lips. We'll need your observational skills for what comes next. She turned to Koenig. I'll need a small team, top secret clearance, full autonomy. You'll have whatever you need, Koenig promised. This operation is our top priority. As Sophia outlined strategy to counter impending attacks, her precision and methodical approach revealed a mind forged over 15 years preparing for this moment. Elise watched the woman erased from history, now calmly plotting to save the nation that left her behind. Outside, Koenig's helicopter waited, rotors idling in the autumn wind. Dusk painted the mountains deep purple. Somewhere beyond, an invisible countdown had begun. As dawn broke over Eisenstadt, a hush descended over the briefing room. Secretary Koenig had left, but the gravity of Sophia Crane's mission lingered like charged air. Talia Crane, once Red Falcon, remained seated at the head of the table, her gaze steady. Lieutenant Elise DuPont stood to one side, the stylized Red Falcon patch pinned to her uniform catching the morning light. Major Heinrich Brenner lingered by the door, uncertainty etched on his face. Colonel Dominic Voss stepped forward, his voice low yet resolute. We deploy in 2 hours. All teams have clearance. Mr. Weiss, status of infiltration points? Valentin Weiss tapped on his tablet, data scrolling rapidly. Team 1 is in position near the northern grid node in Bavaria. Colonel Voss is leading them. Team 2 is at the central Alpine nexus. Lieutenant DuPont and Crane are assigned to the western Nevada station. Sophia Crane nodded. We move on the grid cascade pattern, first failure expected at 1400 hours local. We have a 12-hour window. Any delay and backups will trigger automatic lockdowns. Elise swallowed. Understood. Bomber aircraft hum in the hangar below as support teams finalize EMP deterrent kits. Crane rose, pacing slowly before the giant map on the wall. Remember, she said, voice calm, they've been embedded for years. Some technicians are clean, others compromised. We neutralize threats, not people unless necessary. Major Brenner cleared his throat. Lieutenant DuPont will fly you in aboard the MC-130 stealth transport. Support personnel include Captain Emil Faber and Sergeant Lena Hartmann. Only those 4. Crane accepted the briefing. Good. Once we're on station, we isolate control rooms, confirm integrity of hardware. Weiss will monitor transponder frequencies. Colonel Voss will handle physical containment. Brenner's hesitation surfaced. What about rules of engagement if we face armed resistance from credentialed personnel? Crane paused. Her eyes, once blank, now carried crisp authority. Engagement only if they pose a clear threat to the operation. If lethal force becomes necessary, I authorize it. Brenner nodded and a silent accord was reached. Colonel Voss stepped forward. All right, we move to staging now. 5 minutes to departure. In the hangar, the MC-130 stood silent under high bay lights. Elise and Crane stepped aboard, greeted by Captain Faber, uniform unadorned, face unreadable. Ma'am, he nodded to Crane, then turned to Elise. Ready when you are, Lieutenant. Elise strapped in, heart pounding. Crane took the co-pilot's seat. The engines growled to life, low and insistent. Liftoff was smooth, no flash, no fanfare. As the aircraft slipped into the early sky, Crane's voice came through intercom. Lieutenant, track the Alpine beacon shift patterns. Align for stealth corridor. Valkyrie team expects us in 90 minutes. Elise keyed in coordinates, her fingers steady. Below them, Alps cut shadows like scars. Above them, a mission 15 years in the making was finally in motion. And at the helm, Red Falcon had returned not for her name but for justice. The cold wind sliced through the mountain pass as the MC-130 touched down on the makeshift airstrip in western Nevada. The barren, rocky ground lay dull under a hazy sun, but no one in the team uttered a word of complaint. Talia Crane stepped out first, her combat boots landing silently. Behind her, Lieutenant Elise DuPont and two other members, Captain Emile Faber and Sergeant Lena Hartmann, followed, carrying equipment in complete silence. They moved out in an old SUV, prearranged by Valentine Weiss's network. The vehicle bore civilian plates and had been thoroughly scrubbed. Elise drove, her eyes flicking to the encrypted handheld GPS. 7 minutes to the main substation, she said, her voice taut as a drawn wire. Talia nodded without looking back. The power distribution station was tucked behind a natural cliff wall, surrounded by a tall steel fence and constantly sweeping cameras. 3 maintenance vehicles sat out front, identical to the ones Elise had captured in a recon photo. Talia checked her watch. They've started. She pulled out an identification badge. Department of Energy Emergency Inspection Unit. Elise and Emile clipped on theirs. Lena stayed at the rear, checking weapons and signal jamming gear. At the security gate, the guard requested identification. Talia handed over the paperwork, offering a perfunctory smile. Unscheduled inspection, direct order from Washington. Response code SP304. The guard called it in. Though skeptical, he eventually pressed the gate release. Inside, repair work appeared routine. Technicians in uniform with ID badges were focused on their equipment. Elise scanned the area and leaned in. Device on the right has its own antenna. That's not standard. Talia nodded. Confirmed. That's Charlie team. They were escorted to the main control room. The station manager, a man named Hayward, feigned calm, but his eyes kept darting toward the monitoring systems. There was no notice at all, he muttered. Talia replied evenly, We don't give notice when testing emergency readiness. You know the protocol. Over the next 90 minutes, they inspected the full transmission map, auxiliary machine rooms, and backup battery systems. Elise began spotting irregularities. Open circuit boards, altered grounding wires, control software embedded with hidden code. At 1400 hours, the first signal came from Auxiliary Unit 3, a simulated fault designed to trigger a chain response. The team knew it was time to act. Talia spoke quietly through the internal mic. Merrick, confirm position. Colonel Dominic Voss's voice crackled in her earpiece. Confirmed. Central grid is locked. Proceeding with arrests. Talia signaled. Lena locked the control room door. Emile attached the decoding device to the central system and began scanning for malware. Elise turned to face Hayward. Mr. Hayward, please sit down. You're under investigation for aiding the sabotage of national infrastructure. Hayward made to object, but Talia's icy stare stopped him cold. We know you didn't act alone. Who contacted you? There was no reply. Within 20 minutes, 3 technicians were detained with irrefutable evidence. Internal audio recordings, hidden software modules in control units, and data relayed to a foreign server. They didn't resist. Perhaps they knew every escape route had already been closed. As federal security forces arrived to take over, Talia handed over the evidence and stepped back into the open. The sky remained gray, but a shaft of light had begun to break through from the western range. Elise followed, exhaling slowly, her gaze fixed on the distant steel fence. We just stopped a total systems crash across the western grid, she said. But if they've gotten in this deep... Talia didn't answer right away. She simply looked up at the sky. This was just one station, one link. We have to follow the chain. And if the chain never ends? Talia turned to her. Then we don't stop. The backup helicopter began its descent beyond the perimeter. Elise glanced at Talia one last time. Red Falcon really is back. Never left, Talia replied, striding toward the landing zone. Beneath the thick cuff of her jacket, something shimmered faintly on her left wrist. A faded, weathered insignia, but one that had never disappeared. In the dim light of the underground briefing room beneath the Pentagon, The soft hum of the projector was the only sound among the motionless soldiers and officers. On the large screen, a map of the national power grid appeared, red lines gradually spreading, linking points of intrusion recently detected across all 3 grid sectors. Talia Crane stood at the front, a remote control in her hand, her eyes fixed on the data as if facing a familiar adversary. "This is not an isolated event," she said, her voice calm but unmistakably firm. "The 3 sites we've just shut down are part of a broader operational structure that has existed for at least 12 years. The technicians we apprehended have clean records, no red flags. But when we cross-reference hundreds of technical reports over the past decade, a pattern begins to emerge. A pattern of recruitment, infiltration, and waiting for activation." Beside her, Lieutenant Elise DuPont flipped through a dossier, revealing images of key suspects, nameless in any official system but tagged internally with code names. Echo 9, Stratus 3, Black Nell. Talia pointed to the corner of the map. "Here, on the outskirts of Berlin, there's a signal hub, initially dismissed as natural interference, but data from Sergeant Hartmann's decryption rig confirms it as the origin point of command transmissions. General Sylvester Harlow, speaking from Washington via secure link, nodded. "We've already initiated signal trace protocols, but they're very good at staying hidden. Which is why," Talia said, "we need to take the next step, locating and apprehending their leader." A long silence followed. Then Secretary Orion Caldwell gave a nod. "Operational authority is expanded. Talia, your team is granted full intercontinental jurisdiction under Protocol Omega Tango." "I've selected the personnel," Talia replied. "Lieutenant DuPont continues to lead air coordination. Colonel Voss will manage tactical communications. Captain Faber and Sergeant Hartmann will handle ground support. As for me, I'll lead the point." "You're personally going into Berlin?" Harlow asked. "They'll be expecting you." "They always expect me," Talia answered without blinking. "But this time, I'm not here to hide." She shut off the projector. The lights in the room returned. Everyone stood, no order needed. 36 hours later, at the edge of Grunewald Forest near Berlin, a 5-person team in civilian clothing moved silently between deactivated surveillance stations. Talia led the way, holding a frequency-cutting locator in her hand. Less than 2 kilometers ahead stood an old wooden cabin, outwardly abandoned, but beneath it was one of the most powerful signal centers in Europe. Elise followed close behind, scanning the perimeter with unwavering focus. "No satellite echo. They haven't spotted us." "They think they've already won," whispered Emil Faber. "They're used to being untraceable." "They haven't met Red Falcon," Lena Hartmann added. Inside the cabin, the electronic defenses stirred as the team's jamming equipment activated. A sharp alarm blared, then abruptly cut off. Talia moved to the steel trapdoor hidden beneath the floorboards and knelt. "Hartmann." Lena stepped forward with a lockbreaker device. In under 8 seconds, the hatch popped open, revealing a spiral steel staircase plunging underground. "Positions. No gunfire unless absolutely necessary," Talia ordered, drawing her silenced sidearm. She descended first. The team followed like shadows. In the underground control room, red light glowed across the panels. 3 operators sat at the terminal. None had time to reach for a weapon. Elise took one down in 2 swift moves. Emil and Lena restrained the others. Talia didn't spare them a glance. She went straight to the signal hub, inserted a backup drive, and the system began to flood with data. A file appeared, Vortex BHI, classified at the highest level. "Got it," she said. "Begin uplink to LEO-3 subsatellite. Blackwood will intercept." Elise complied. Took under 3 minutes. Suddenly, a siren shrieked. "Systems detecting the decryption. Initiating data wipe." Lena shouted. "Cut power," Talia ordered. Emil pulled a blade and severed the main power line. Sparks flew. The screens went dark. Silence returned. Elise looked at Talia. "They know we've breached." "Good," Talia said. "Now they get to run." As the team withdrew from the facility, the cabin behind them remained still, as if untouched. but in their possession was data capable of unraveling every link in the dark chain. And this time it would be the shadows that were hunted. On the ride back, Elise sat beside Talia in the vehicle. After this, if we cut to the route, what then? No one ever cuts out all the routes, Talia replied, eyes on the road ahead. But if we can drag them into the light, we've already changed the game. Elise was quiet for a moment. Then softly, did you ever think you'd get to live in peace? Talia smiled faintly. I wasn't born for peace. And the vehicle disappeared into the dark woods, carrying with it a piece of a war the world still didn't know was happening. Right in its heart. Talia and Elise sat silently in the concealed cargo compartment of the Argenfeld logistics truck, disguised as cooling system inspectors. The vehicle passed through the outer perimeter of the Debrecen facility in the chill of early spring, the sun hidden behind layers of leaden clouds. The first checkpoint went smoothly. Their forged documents, generated using authentic samples provided by Blackwood, passed the encrypted authentication system Kalmar believed was impenetrable. At the second checkpoint, a guard climbed into the cabin to verify the transport manifest. Elise offered a perfectly timed smile and handed over the technical log. The guard flipped through a few pages, glanced down at his handheld scanner, and nodded them through. As the iron gates opened, the entire complex came into view. A network of scattered antennas, reinforced domes, and cable routes snaking underground. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and metal. Talia and Elise merged into the stream of real engineers working the systems. With every step, they memorized hallway layouts, camera positions, and patrol patterns. 23 minutes after entry, they reached basement level C, where Kalmar was reported to regularly oversee core data synchronization. Talia retrieved a frequency jamming tool designed by Blackwood, a thumb-sized drive capable of disrupting camera feeds for exactly 27 seconds. Just enough time for the two to slip through a service door, past a storage bay, and into a secondary control room. Behind one-way glass, Victor Kalmar was coordinating a full network encryption update. He looked older than his file photo, salt and pepper stubble, but eyes still cold and precise as a scalpel. Talia watched him through the glass and whispered, "Oberlicht." Elise placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ready." Talia nodded. Right on cue, the head of the security team passed through the hallway outside, allowing them to pose as engineers needing internal network support. The ambush was clean. Elise took down two guards with a high-intensity pulse device. Talia unlocked the control room with a biodecoder, using a stolen DNA sample from an old medical report Blackwood had extracted from a private insurance archive. The door opened. Victor turned, reaching for the alarm, then froze when he saw Talia. A slow, grudging smile crept across his face, one that couldn't mask his respect. "I knew this day would come," he said. "I just didn't think you were still alive." Talia didn't answer. She spoke an old command phrase, one that hadn't been used since Operation Nightshade. "Revoke coordination privileges. Command pattern Delta 1 Sigma Echo." Victor stood still for a moment. That protocol was scrubbed from the system in 2009. Talia stepped closer. Not from all systems. She activated a triple encrypted playback device, transmitting a command sequence only Victor and one other person had ever known, her. The system halted. Processes shut down one by one. Control room lights shifted to red. Elise sealed the door from inside. Victor was isolated. "You can't stop it," he said. "You can shut down one branch, but the structure has already replicated. It's unstoppable." "I don't need to stop all of it," Talia replied. "I just need you." She slid a data recording unit toward him. "Names, coordinates, subcode registry." Victor gave a dry laugh. "And if I refuse?" Elise held up a device Blackwood referred to as a post-memory window, a biometric neural interrogation tool. Victor glanced at it, said nothing, then exhaled deeply. "We're not your enemy. You know that, right?" "You're not," Talia said. "You're just the one who opened the gate for them." Victor looked into her eyes and began typing. 35 minutes later, they left the data center. Victor was still alive, sedated, and left with enough evidence to paralyze any connected organization for months. Elise activated the trace erasure sequence, wiping system logs and blurring surveillance records. Talia pushed the equipment cart toward the exit, just as a new transport crew arrived. No one noticed. No one remembered their faces. As the truck passed through the final gate, Elise remained quiet. Talia stared ahead. Hand gripping the drive, Victor had surrendered. Inside it, a list of secondary control nodes, financial ties, and finally, a name. A name she once believed buried. A name once part of her team in Nightshade. A name that betrayed them all. She spoke it aloud, slicing through a memory she'd kept tightly sealed. Marin Kovac. Elise turned to her, voice low. Where do we find him? Talia answered without hesitation. Istanbul. And with that, the storm shifted course once more. Istanbul emerged through the cockpit window like a living labyrinth, the blue domes of mosques glinting in the sunset, winding alleys glowing amber, and ships drifting slowly along the Bosphorus. But to Talia and Elise, its beauty was just a mask over a web of underground dealings where information, identities, and betrayal were traded at the highest cost. They landed on Turkish soil at 3:27 through a side gate at the now-defunct military section of Atatürk Airport using a special identity activated through Blackwood's missing persons network. No luggage checks. No questions asked. Talia didn't rest. She knew Kovac. He never stayed in one place long. And if Kalmar hadn't lied, which he wouldn't dare, then Kovac was the link between the original Nightshade network and an entirely new system, operating in the dark but reaching deep into allied institutions. Elise worked through layers of contacts, meeting with a source named Yarın, a former counterintelligence officer from the Turkish Ministry of the Interior, once saved by Talia from a covert deportation 7 years earlier. He's in Galata, Yarın said. I sealed floor in an unnamed hotel. He changes location every 4 days. But tonight, he'll be there. No need to ask how Yarın knew. People like her survived on information, not weapons. They approached the hotel through an old tunnel once used as a wartime escape route. Elise led the way using a thermal map from a sub-satellite. Above, mercenaries patrolled, not in uniform, but moving with unmistakable training. Talia signaled, one path in, one chance. They stuck close to the wall, silent. At the third-floor back entrance, Elise activated an electromagnetic lockpick embedded in what looked like a piece of jewelry on her watch. Inside, Marin Kovac sat before a large screen, a briefcase beside him marked with a seal Talia recognized instantly, an emblem from a disbanded unit tied to Nightshade. She stepped in, gun hidden beneath her coat. Elise closed the door behind them. Kovac didn't flinch. Talia Voss, he said. I thought you died in that mine. I lived because I needed to know why you betrayed us, Talia replied. Kovac didn't deny it. Because Nightshade was a lie. They weren't saving anyone. They were laying the path for a new power. I just got there first. You sold out every name on the team, Talia said flatly. You think you have time to explain? Kovac offered a faint smile. No. But I have something you need. In the case, activation schedules for nodes targeting global financial systems. Without them, everything you did in Debrecen means nothing. Talia glanced at Elise. 1 second. 2. No shots fired. Kovac opened the briefcase. Inside, encrypted drives, operation codes for a covert Asian circuit, and a map marking 3 cities, Jakarta, Almaty, and Bucharest. Why give this to me? Talia asked. Because someone else is coming, Kovac said, eyes darkening. Bigger than Nightshade. And this time, they don't ask permission. Gunfire rang out in the hallway. Elise rushed to the door, gun drawn. Kovac pulled a Walther from a desk drawer and fired through a vent. 1 mercenary dropped. I'll hold the back. You've got 90 seconds. Take the data and go. Talia started to protest, but Elise pulled her arm. No time. They rushed down the emergency stairwell as Kovac fired a final shot, not to survive, but to buy time. Under Galata's shadow, the 2 women vanished into traffic, carrying evidence of a war not yet begun. Talia said nothing. She stared at the map in her hands, 3 names that were no longer destinations, but battlegrounds. The old shadows hadn't lifted, but a new storm was forming. 3 hours later, in a subterranean room beneath a defunct data center in Sofia, Talia Voss and Elise faced what Kovac's files had revealed, a complete network of data injection points, where global cybersecurity frameworks could be rewritten from within using simulated command sequences to create criminal records, erase digital traces, even alter identities inside national government systems. Elise worked nonstop, eyes scanning lines of code and encrypted logs, but it was Talia who spotted the pattern, a sequence of numbers that didn't follow any logic, one that had surfaced before a banking crash in Lagos, again before a power grid failure in Bulgaria, and most crucially, the night Operation Nightshade fell apart. This group isn't just building networks, Elise whispered. They're rewriting the system, redefining the rules of the world. Talia nodded. They're not sabotaging anymore. They're controlling. A map appeared on-screen. 3 cities marked Bucharest, Jakarta, and Almaty. All 3 had one thing in common: national data backup systems undergoing upgrades, all maintained by the same contractor, Helix Vector Solutions, a company that hadn't existed 3 months ago. We split, Talia said. I'll go to Jakarta. You take Almaty. Blackwood will coordinate with Merrick in Bucharest. Elise looked up. Won't splitting up make us vulnerable? Not as vulnerable as letting all 3 sites be injected simultaneously, Talia replied. Each one has to be neutralized within 48 hours. If not, the world will wake up to a new power structure and no one will realize they've lost control. 2 hours later, Talia was already in Singapore, seated in a special passport check room on a military flight route, awaiting her covert transfer to Jakarta using a diplomatic credential signed under a name only a few still remembered. She wore a plain long coat, white shirt, hair tied up, no insignia. But inside her backpack was the full automated decryption system Elise had built, capable of detecting and halting a live code injection, but only once. One shot. In Almaty, Elise approached the target through an underground fiber conduit from a cloud storage vault. The city was buried in snow, but server temperatures were spiking, a sign that a non-standard process was underway. Elise used a forged internal signal to gain access. She quickly saw the data architecture had been mirrored and inverted, a tactic to simulate a false disruption, delaying security responses by 5 minutes. In that time, the injection would complete. Elise clenched her fist. Not if I'm on time. She plugged her device into the mainframe. Lights turned red. She input the breaker code. 3 minutes. As she halted the process, she also downloaded the malware for future analysis. But just before it finished, a message popped up: no sender, just a single line. The game began when you joined Nightshade, Elise Marate. She froze. No one but Talia and Blackwood knew her full name. In Jakarta, Talia infiltrated the national data hub through the basement of a former Dutch-era library, now converted into a monitoring outpost for analysts. Standing on colonial-era tiles, she slotted her device into the central node. A screen lit up, not with data, but with a grainy video of herself 15 years ago during Operation Nightshade. The footage was never made public. In it, her voice spoke: if someone's seeing this, I didn't make it back. But what I found can't be buried. She frowned. Who had this clip? Then another voice echoed in her earpiece. Talia Voss. We've been waiting for you. The system locked. The screen turned to black code. A dialog box opened. Talia, switch sides. You don't belong to them anymore. She stared into a hidden camera, face unreadable. I don't belong to anyone. I just tear down what you built. She yanked the cable and triggered a protocol Elise had designed, frying the backup station in 6 seconds with a targeted pulse. The injection was stopped. But they now knew she'd been there. She signaled the satellite tracker, requesting immediate extraction. Meanwhile in Bucharest, Merrick and Blackwood, deep in an underground fallback center, watched as Eastern Europe's entire data mirror flickered, then went dark. They've launched the new system, Blackwood said. Merrick hit the emergency override, but a second too late. A symbol appeared on screen, a Red Falcon's eye surrounded by binary code. Red Falcon, no longer a name. Now a declaration. One side restoring order, the other rewriting it. And behind that screen, the one giving the orders, still unseen. On an unnamed island off the coast of Malta, in a facility that was once an abandoned naval observatory, Talia Voss sat in the dark, the glow of a mobile screen reflecting across her sharp, unreadable face. Data from the 3 disrupted points had confirmed one thing: the enemy network was no longer in testing phase, they had begun merging, and not only in the digital realm. A decrypted file Elise recovered on her flight back from Almaty revealed encryption protocols tied to 3 central banks, 2 defense contractors, and a chain of private biolabs with branches in Geneva. The objective was no longer control, it was restructuring the world once everything they touched collapsed. Talia stood, walked into the operations room where the temporary command group had assembled. Elise Marate was parsing the latest data packet with Blackwood, while Merrick stood by the map table, arms crossed, tracking satellite patterns. They've moved into Phase 2, Elise said without looking up. I've been monitoring a signal cluster originating from ungoverned territory, a research center disguised as a humanitarian medical outpost. Talia's brows tightened. When does it begin? 3 days. They're calling it Omega Fade. After a digital blackout, they'll trigger a series of simulated health and financial crises. But the key is, all the responses will be led by intervention teams they've already embedded. They manufacture the crisis, Merrick concluded, then pose as the ones who solve it. Talia nodded. And no one will remember what legitimate authority looked like. She moved to the map. We need to breach Omega Fade's core before it initiates. But not as a unit, we'd be flagged immediately. Blackwood laid down a schematic, a network beneath Geneva, hidden within wartime stone bunkers repurposed as a classified data compound. There's one safe entry, one exit. No uniforms, no backup. Max team of 3. Everyone must vanish from all systems at least 24 hours before contact. Elise glanced at Talia. So, ghosts again. Talia only smiled faintly. 2 days later, near the French-Swiss border, a white, unmarked utility van halted at a technical checkpoint outside Lausanne. No one noticed the hard drive hidden in the toolbox containing a complete replica of Omega Fade's protocols. Elise and Talia, posing as power engineers, blended perfectly with the environment. At the designated time, they left the van, disappearing into the pine forests leading toward Geneva, entering through an old maintenance tunnel once linking 2 underground research facilities. Inside Omega Fade, flashing lights reflected off cold metal. Technicians bustled, unaware that 2 monitoring stations had been silently replaced overnight by individuals who didn't exist in any personnel database. Elise slipped between server stacks, planting a signal disruptor directly into the core encryptor. 5 minutes until satellite sync, she whispered. After that, we can't reverse it. Across the corridor, Talia stood before a biometric locked door. She wore a glove designed by Blackwood capable of mimicking temporary biometric signatures. The door slid open. She stepped into the command room. A woman was waiting, unsurprised. Mid-40s, ash-gray shirt, eyes colder than steel. I knew you'd come, she said. We've been ready for a long time. Who are you? Talia asked. You used to call me Valkyrie, the woman replied. Now we go by a new name. You can't stop the end, Talia. You can only delay the inevitable. I'm not stopping the end, Talia replied, pulling a disruptor from her coat pocket. I'm restoring choice. She activated the device. Every system in the room went dark. At the same time, Elise typed the final override, the sync signal was blocked and the system auto-switched into diagnostic mode. A code string flashed on the screen, abort Omega Fade. Override code, V.T9 coda. The woman stepped back, silent. But on her face, for the first time, fear. Outside, cold wind swept the mountains. The steel door behind Talia shut as she stepped out, not looking back. Elise was waiting. It's done. Talia nodded. Now comes the hard part. Elise frowned. What? Finding out who let this network live for 20 years and never got caught. They vanished into the night. In a system where anyone could be replaced, some names could not be erased as long as someone dared to remember. In Brussels, the city glowed under the lights of its government towers where decisions hid behind closed meetings and unread memoranda. Deep within the European Union Security Council complex, Secretary-General Matthias de Vries read a classified report. Omega Fade status, off-grid interference, code V.T9, operation successful, core systems neutralized. He sat in silence, then slowly lowered the file. Convene emergency session. Indigo protocol. Alpha clearance only. Meanwhile, at a covert facility beneath the Jura Mountains, Talia and Elise faced a screen filled with data feeds, banking records, travel logs, metadata from global summits. It all pointed to an entity long whispered about, the Concord. A stateless group functioning as an operating system embedded within governments, corporations, and international aid networks. Elise narrowed her eyes. No headquarters. No spokesperson. Just directives executed as if they came from official channels. Talia nodded. Omega Fade was just the interface. The real machine lies deeper, where even national security agencies are just wallpaper. Asher Blackwood entered a command sequence, the screen lit up with a real-time linkage map. 6 blinking red nodes representing 6 individuals holding core command over the Concord. None on any wanted list. Some were senior government advisors. One was the UN Health Coordinator. Another a strategic director for a transcontinental energy group. They had committed no direct crimes, yet every major crisis of the past 2 decades traced financial or strategic lines back to them. Can we prosecute them? Elise asked. No, Talia said. We dismantle the network, revoke their access, shut down their tools. No bullets. Every action must sever an artery. What about the name? Blackwood asked. We don't need it anymore, Talia said, eyes locked on the screen. They know we've seen them. In Paris, one of the six, Georges Markov, stepped toward his car after a defense budget meeting. A stranger handed him a black envelope and vanished into the crowd. Inside, a note. We know the encryption you wrote in 2011. We've broken it. And we're coming. No signature. Only a faint Red Falcon printed in watered ink. Back at the base, Merrick entered carrying an intercepted Swiss government bulletin. They're pushing back, he said. Rumors of a rogue cyber terror group are spreading across forums. Elise smirked. They're trying to use fear to seize power again. Talia was quiet, then said, then we'll use that fear to expose them. How? By releasing the truth one layer at a time to the right people at the right moment. No explanations. Let the facts speak. A nighttime plan was set, each document decrypted and routed to carefully selected investigative journalists through encrypted channels. Financial anomalies would be accidentally uncovered. Internal probes quietly triggered. Elise looked at Talia. You know they won't sit still. I know, Talia said. But this time they'll have to surface to strike. And when they do, we'll have names. Real names. Not code names. Not initials. No more shadows. Outside, thunder rumbled over the mountains. Elise turned to resume the first data drop, then paused. Talia, what if they strike back directly? Talia met her gaze, not cold, but the look of someone who's gone too far to turn back. Then we stand. A week passed since the first night of light, not yet bright, but enough to flicker through the dark. Journalists across the globe began receiving encrypted packets from Talia and Blackwood's network, banking errors, secret transaction trails, video fragments from Concord meetings. No logos revealed, only fragments. But when assembled, they formed a sketch of a power structure openly manipulating global policy. In Geneva, the EU Security Council fractured. Some demanded internal investigation. Others accused the leaks of being an act of digital war. But no one dared call the data fake because nothing in it was excessive. Legitimacy itself wavered on a knife's edge. In Jura, Talia stood before a global reaction map. Elise laid a second data pack on the table. Looks like they tried to trace the source through the Swedish reporter. Talia frowned. Prep cover protocol. Have a public-facing non-profit ready, call it the Global Data Integrity Initiative. They won't trace the second wave. That night, as Merrick left the tech room, he entered Talia's private zone. We've been flagged, he said. There's talk of shutting the project down. Talia didn't look up. If Concord loses data control, they'll use governments against us. But if we let them roam free, they won't need to attack. We'll do their work for them. It wasn't hope. It was steel. In the secure zone, Blackwood formed a technical strike team. If they shut down the rails, we make new ones. Anonymous, distributed, embedded in civilian apps. He ran code through a hidden server. On command, it'll reroute everything. Night broke across 3 continents. Europe roiled in policy conflict. Asia's largest bank shuttered a Concord-linked branch. The U.S. Congress launched an emergency hearing on unauthorized systemic data breaches. Bats don't fear light. Concord nodes struck back, leaking rumors that CIA or Mossad had staged it all. The media war began. In the bunker, the team monitored TV, socials, forums. Elise whispered, "They're making the public doubt the source. They're trying to kill the archive." Talia nodded. "Information is the only thing they can take. If we hold it, they can't win. That's our battlefield now." She stood, eyes sharp. "Push Pack 3. Focus on health funding algorithms. If possible, freeze one major bank. Let the world know no one's safe." Merrick entered. Swiss bank reports 45-minute sync delay. System glitch. Elise lit up. "That's the sign. A public challenge." Talia nodded. "Means they noticed. Tried to stop us. Now we go further. Leak Markov's anonymous letter to the EU Council. Tie Concord to Europe's financial backbone." Silence. Dawn approached. In Brussels, De Vries received the original letter. Shocking enough for an immediate council vote. At the window, he whispered, "They're starting to show their faces. Now we choose sides." The next morning in Jura, Talia pulled up the final report. Signature, Red Falcon. But now it was code, an imminent strike by shadow power. "We've pulled them out." she said, calm and clear. Now they have to respond. Some names will fall. And once it's all out in the open, we'll know where to strike next. And cut their lights one by one. Red Falcon stood on the brink of a new war. A silent war in the shadows of global power. In the quiet of the Jura bunker, even keystrokes echoed. Talia stood before a global grid. Finance, security, media. Brussels triggered global response, she said. EU first, then US inquiries, and now Asia's spiraling. Elise tapped the screen. Concord is retaliating. Rumors linking us to foreign intelligence are everywhere. Blackwood said, "We've jammed the first node. Step 2. Publish the list of frozen Concord bank accounts. If they don't respond, they'll be exposed." Merrick added, "But if they have leverage, they'll use the law against us." "Then we're ready," Talia said. Operation Shadow Pulse launched. Exposing accounts, global transfers, terrorist funnels. In 24 hours, headlines spanned Al Jazeera to Wall Street Journal, calling Concord the only known cross-border shadow operation with overt financial reach. A leaked security video showed a Concord banker destroying documents, enough to spark a US SEC probe. Concord's counterattack, planting rumors within the UN labeling Red Falcon and GDII as terror fronts. But NGOs and transparent governments quickly refuted the claims. Under pressure, Concord reached the end of its rope, facing calls for total financial lockdown. Just then, Talia received a call from a U.S. Defense senior advisor. Red Falcon, ICC, and SEC request a press conference. "Everyone wants to see you." She listened. Her voice was soft but firm. "It's time." A week later, in Geneva, a woman stepped to the podium. No uniform, no emblem, just a dark coat and sharp eyes. "I didn't come to be honored," she said to the silent room. "I came to say, some things must be exposed before they kill us without us knowing we're victims. We've been lucky to survive this long." A video played, 200 hostages rescued during Operation Nightshade. She watched, then spoke again. "I am Red Falcon." Reporters froze. The news spread faster than legal silencing. Red Falcon, once erased from every record, now leads the global counter-operation against systemic manipulation. The echo wasn't limited to Geneva. It thundered through Washington, Beijing, Tokyo, Canberra, where global finance could no longer ignore the call to act.